The soil should not have been glowing. Dr. Elias Vance stood at the edge of the test field in northern Kenya, watching thin threads of green light pulse beneath the dark earth like veins under skin. It was 3 in the morning. No one else was awake to see it. He knelt down, pressed his palm flat against the ground, and felt a faint warmth rise into his fingers, as if the soil itself was breathing. He told himself it was nothing. Static electricity, bioluminescent bacteria, something explainable. He had told himself that for 6 years. 6 years since Prometheus grain had first sprouted in a lab in Nairobi, a crop that grew in sand, in salt flats, in soil poisoned by drought. 6 years since it had spread to every continent, feeding nations that had never known a harvest without hunger. The world called him a saint. Children were named after him. His face had been on the cover of every major magazine on Earth, always under some version of the same headline: "The Man Who Ended World Hunger." What the world did not know was that Elias had not fully understood his own creation. The core genetic sequence at the heart of Prometheus grain, the part that let it grow anywhere, that made it resist disease, drought, and time itself, had not come from his lab. It had come from a sample he could not explain, found buried 3 meters below a crater in the Kenyan desert, a crater his team had stumbled onto by accident during an early field survey. He had used it. He had built his legacy on it. And for 6 years, he had never told anyone where it truly came from. He stood up and wiped the dirt from his hand, and that was when his phone buzzed in his pocket. The screen showed no caller ID, no signal bars, no network. It rang anyway. He answered without meaning to. His hand simply moved on its own. "Dr. Vance," a voice said. It was smooth, calm, and utterly without emotion, like a voice built from a machine that had studied 1,000 recordings of human speech, but had never actually felt anything. "You have done well. Phase 1 of the harvest protocol is complete. We are pleased." Elias stood frozen in the dark field, the wind moving the grain around him in long silver waves. "Who is this?" he said, though his voice came out smaller than he intended. "You will understand soon," the voice replied. "The others did not understand until the end. You have more time than they did. Use it wisely, Dr. Vance." The call ended. The phone showed no record that it had ever happened. 4,000 miles away, in a cramped apartment above a bakery in Manchester, Mara Vance was staring at a blacked-out paragraph in a leaked internal report and trying to decide if she was losing her mind. She was 29, sharp-eyed, and had spent the last 3 years building a reputation as a journalist who chased stories other people were too afraid to touch. She had inherited her father's stubbornness and none of his fame, which suited her fine. She did not want to be known as Elias Vance's daughter. She wanted to be known for finding the truth. The report in front of her had come from a source who called himself only R. He worked or had worked in one of her father's research facilities. 3 days ago, he had sent her a message that said, "Soil is dying where the grain grows best. They are hiding the die-off maps. Ask your father about Site 9. Then he had gone silent. She had tried calling him. The number was disconnected. She had tried his workplace. They told her no employee by that name had ever existed. She had tried his listed address. It was an empty lot. Mara set down her coffee and opened a satellite mapping tool, typing in the coordinates the source had sent along with his first message. The image loaded slowly. When it finished, she leaned back in her chair. Site 9 was a perfect circle of dead brown earth, nearly 2 kilometers wide, sitting in the middle of an otherwise lush green Prometheus grain field in the Nevada desert. At the center of the circle was a shape she could not make out. Something metallic. Something that did not belong. She zoomed in as far as the resolution allowed. The shape had edges too clean to be natural, and a symmetry that reminded her, uncomfortably, of teeth. Her phone rang. It was her father. "Dad," she said, relieved to hear his voice, though something in his tone stopped her from continuing. "Mara," Elias said, "I need you to listen to me carefully. Have you heard anything strange lately? Any calls you can't explain? Any numbers that don't show up right? She glanced back at the screen, at Site 9, at the metal shape buried in dead earth. Dad? What's going on? I'll explain when I see you, he said. Don't publish anything about Site 9. Not yet, please. How do you know I was looking at Site 9? The line went quiet for a moment. Because I built it, he said. Or something built it, using me. I don't fully understand yet. But Mara, someone just called me. Something. It congratulated me. It used the words, Harvest Protocol. Mara felt the hair rise on her arms. Come to London, she said. Now. Colonel Ana Reyes had not slept in 2 days, and the report on her desk was the reason why. She commanded a small joint task force attached to a quiet corner of U.S. Army intelligence, the kind of unit that existed on paper as an agricultural security division, and existed in practice to investigate anything strange enough that no one wanted their name on the paperwork. For the last 18 months, that meant investigating the disappearances. Farmers near Prometheus grain test sites in 6 countries had gone missing. Livestock vanished from fenced pastures with no signs of struggle. Local police wrote it off as coyotes, wolves, human traffickers, anything that fit a familiar shape. But Reyes had pulled the pattern together herself, plotting every disappearance on a single map, and the pattern was not random. Every incident sat within 12 kilometers of a Prometheus grain deep-root test site. Every single one. Her phone buzzed. A message from her second-in-command, Sergeant Okafor, sent from the Nevada field station near Site 9. Ma'am, you need to see this. Ground radar just picked up movement under Site 9. Something's waking up. She was already standing, already reaching for her jacket, when a second message came through. Correction. Not movement under the site itself. It's opening. Reyes ran. By the time Elias reached Mara's apartment in London, dawn had broken gray and cold over the city. She opened the door before he could knock, pulling him inside, her laptop already open on the kitchen table, the image of Site 9 glowing on the screen. Tell me everything, she said. Don't protect me. Don't soften it. Tell me what you know. Elias sat down heavily, looking older than she had ever seen him look. 6 years ago, he said, before Prometheus grain, before any of it, my team found something buried in the desert, a sample, organic, but not from any species on Earth. I used its genetic structure to build the grain. I told myself it didn't matter where the science came from, only what it could do. I told myself I was helping people. And now? Now something is calling me. Something that thinks I work for it. He looked at her, and for the first time in Mara's life, she saw real fear in her father's eyes. Mara, I think Prometheus grain was never mine. I think I was just the last step in someone else's plan. And I think that plan is finally finishing. His phone buzzed again. The same blank screen, the same impossible call. He looked at Mara, and she nodded once, telling him to answer it, telling him she needed to hear this too. He put it on speaker. Dr. Vance, the voice said, calm as still water. The Kalu Dominion thanks you for your service. Population thresholds have been met. Genetic priming is complete across your species. The harvest begins in 72 hours. The call ended. Outside the window far above London, a single point of light that had not been there a moment ago began to grow brighter in the morning sky. The light in the sky was not a star, and by noon, half the world knew it. Telescopes across 6 continents locked onto the object within hours. It was moving, slowly but deliberately, growing larger by the day, and every space agency that studied it came to the same impossible conclusion. It was not a comet, not debris, not anything natural. It was structured. It had angles. Elias and Mara watched the news coverage in silence, the words, "Harvest begins in 72 hours," still echoing in both their minds, though neither of them had told anyone what the voice on the phone had said. Not yet. Not until they understood more. "We need Site 9, Mara said, closing her laptop. "Whatever's buried there, it's connected to that thing in the sky. I know it. Elias rubbed his eyes. Site 9 is a restricted military zone now, has been for months. I couldn't get near it even with my clearance. Then we find someone who can. Colonel Ana Reyes had reached the Nevada field station 11 hours after Okafor's message, and what she found waiting for her made every strange report of the last 18 months click into place at once. The dead circle of Earth at Site 9 had split open like a wound, revealing a smooth black structure beneath it, half buried, curved like the hull of a massive ship, but etched with patterns that resembled circuitry grown rather than built. Her team had set up a perimeter, floodlights washing the structure in harsh white light, but no one had gone inside yet. No one wanted to be first. "Ma'am," Okafor said, jogging up beside her, his face pale under the lights. "Ground team confirms it's hollow. There's a chamber. And ma'am, there's writing, or something like writing, on the walls." "Show me." He hesitated. "You should also know. Command wants this contained, quietly. No press, no leaks, no local authorities. They're already drafting a cover story. Gas explosion, maybe." Reyes looked at him for a long moment. "How many people have died near sites like this in the last 2 years, Sergeant?" 41 confirmed. "Ma'am, we don't know that this is connected." "We both know it's connected." She pulled on a pair of gloves and clicked on her flashlight. "Get me a recording team. If this is going to get buried by our own government, someone outside this fence needs to know the truth exists." She stepped through the opening into the dark. The chamber inside was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Reyes felt it in her chest, a pressure, like standing somewhere she was not meant to stand. The walls curved upward into a dome, and across every surface, symbols glowed faintly blue, pulsing in slow rhythm like a heartbeat. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform, and on it, a single object, a sphere the size of a basketball, dark as obsidian, humming faintly. "Command wants that thing removed and shipped to a secure facility," Okafor said quietly beside her. "Whole thing's above both our pay grades now." "Get pictures of everything first," Reyes said. "Every wall, every symbol, before anyone touches that sphere." She walked closer, studying the glowing patterns on the curved walls. Most of it meant nothing to her, alien shapes without translation. But near the base of the platform, one series of markings was different, simpler, more deliberate, almost as if it had been placed there for someone to eventually find and understand. It was a star map, and at its center, circled in a color that looked disturbingly like dried blood, was a small blue dot. Earth. Beside the dot was a single symbol, repeated 3 times in a triangle formation. She did not know what it meant, but something about its shape, sharp, angular, final, made her stomach turn. "Ma'am," Okafor said, his voice suddenly tight. "The sphere. It's not just humming anymore." Reyes turned. The sphere was glowing brighter, the blue light spreading up through the platform and into the walls, the symbols flaring in sequence like a countdown finally reaching its end. "Everyone out," she said. "Now." They were halfway to the entrance when the ground shook. Not an explosion. Something worse, something deliberate. A low vibration that rolled up through the earth itself and out into the desert beyond. Outside, soldiers were shouting, pointing upward. Reyes stepped out of the chamber and looked up. The point of light that had been growing in the sky for the last day was no longer a single point. It had split into dozens, then hundreds, streaks of white fire arcing down through the atmosphere, moving with a grace that no human aircraft could match. "Sound the alarm," she said, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. "Get command on the line. Tell them the buried structure just woke up, and tell them—" She watched the first of the descending ships break through the cloud layer, revealing a hull built from something that looked like dark metal, grown in curling, organic shapes. "Tell them they're already here." In London, Mara's phone screamed with breaking alerts at the same moment the first ship was spotted over the Nevada desert. Within an hour, sightings poured in from every continent, massive silent shapes descending toward major cities, hovering at the edge of the atmosphere, close enough to see with the naked eye but far enough to avoid immediate panic fire from any nation's defense systems. Elias stood at the window, watching one such shape hang low over the London skyline, and felt something inside him break quietly, the last piece of denial he had been holding on to for 6 years. "They used me," he said. "Whatever's happening, whatever they came here for, I was part of the plan from the beginning. Prometheus grain wasn't luck. It wasn't genius. It was seeding." "Seeding for what?" Mara asked, though some part of her already feared the answer. His phone buzzed. Not the strange, untraceable call this time. A text from a number she didn't recognize, but the message made her blood run cold anyway. "This is R, the one who sent you the Site-9 files. I'm alive, but not for long if they find me. I know what the harvest protocol means. I worked on decoding it for 2 years before I understood. Meet me. Alone. Tell no one, especially not your father's contacts in government. Some of them already know, and they are not on our side." An address followed. A warehouse near the Thames. Mara looked up at her father, who was still watching the silent shape hovering over the city, its shadow slowly crawling across the rooftops toward them. "I have to go," she said. "Absolutely not," Elias said, turning from the window. "Mara, those ships are not attacking. Not yet. Whatever they want from us, it isn't over in a single afternoon. Or that voice on your phone wouldn't have given you 72 hours. She grabbed her coat. "R spent 2 years decoding whatever this is. That's 2 years of answers we don't have, Dad. I'm not letting that source disappear the way the last one nearly did." She was at the door before he could stop her. "Mara!" he called after her, and something in his voice made her pause. "If this is real, if they truly are here to harvest us the way farmers harvest a field, then whatever you find in that warehouse might be the only warning humanity gets." She nodded once and stepped out into a city gone quiet with fear, the alien shape drifting silently overhead, and somewhere above the clouds, hundreds more descending behind it. She never made it to the warehouse. 3 blocks from the address, a black vehicle pulled alongside her, its windows tinted, its government plates gleaming under the streetlight. The door opened before it had fully stopped. "Ms. Vance," a man said, stepping out, his expression unreadable, an earpiece blinking faintly at his ear. "You need to come with us right now. It's about your father's connection to Site-9 and about something even he doesn't know yet." Behind him, 2 more agents stepped out, and Mara realized with a cold drop in her stomach that she had no way to run. Mara did not go quietly, but she went. The black vehicle drove in silence for 20 minutes, weaving through streets that had gone strangely empty, most of London locked indoors, eyes turned upward toward the shapes drifting in formation above the clouds. The man who had pulled her from the street sat across from her now, calm, watching her with an expression that was almost sympathetic. "Who are you?" Mara said. "And what do you know about my father?" "Agent Whitfield, Joint Global Threat Division," he said. "And I know your father has been carrying a secret for 6 years that most of the world's governments only pieced together in the last 48 hours. We need his cooperation. Yours too, given your source." Mara went still. "You know about R. We know a defected researcher has been feeding information to a journalist. We'd like to know what he told you before he goes dark for good, one way or another." The vehicle pulled into an underground facility beneath what looked, from the outside, like an ordinary government building. Fluorescent lights, gray corridors, the low hum of servers. It could have been any bureaucratic office in the world except for the screens lining the central command room they led her into. Dozens of them, all showing the same thing from different angles. Ships, hundreds of them, hovering silently above the world's largest cities, unmoving, waiting. Elias was already there. "Dad." "I'm all right," he said quickly, crossing the room to her. "They picked me up an hour after you left. Mara, listen to me. They've made contact." A woman in a gray suit stepped forward, her face tired in the particular way of someone who had not slept in days and did not expect to sleep again soon. "Director Chen, United Nations Emergency Council. Dr. Vance, Ms. Vance. Thank you for coming. I wish it were under better circumstances. Contact, Mara repeated. You mean they're talking to us? Chen nodded toward the largest screen, where a live feed showed a chamber inside one of the ships. Reyes's team had been granted access, cameras rolling, as an alien envoy prepared to speak for the first time in recorded history. You should watch this, Chen said quietly. Everyone should. The envoy appeared on screen not as a monster, not as the nightmare humanity's fiction had long imagined, but as something almost disappointingly ordinary. Tall, slender, humanoid, its skin a pale gray-green, its eyes large and dark and utterly without visible emotion. It wore no armor, carried no visible weapon. It simply stood in the center of the chamber, flanked by two others, and spoke in a voice that matched exactly the one Elias had heard on his phone. People of Earth, it said, the words translating in real time through some device none of the assembled human officials understood. I am Vessel Speaker Orentel of the Kailu Dominion. We come to you not as conquerors, but as cultivators. Your species has completed the cycle that many before you have completed. We are here to begin the harvest. A human official, someone from the American delegation, spoke first, his voice shaking with barely controlled anger. Harvest of what? Resources? Territory? Name your terms. Orentel tilted its head, an almost curious gesture. Not resources. Not territory. You. Silence swept through every command room on Earth watching the feed. The Dominion has cultivated 412 worlds across 17 galactic arms, the envoy continued. Its tone as flat and reasonable as someone reading a weather report. We seed a species with the means to end scarcity. Agricultural abundance, disease resistance, population stability. We wait for that species to grow, to flourish, to reach the threshold of true civilization. And then we return, and the species becomes part of the Dominion's labor collective. Biomass, intellect, and craft integrated into our systems. This is not cruelty. This is the natural order of cultivation. You were always meant to be harvested. Dr. Vance's grain was simply the final stage of your preparation. Elias felt the floor tilt beneath him. Every head in the room turned toward him. He knew, someone whispered. I didn't, Elias said, his voice breaking. I swear to you, I didn't know. It does not matter whether he knew, Orentel said, as if answering a question no one had asked aloud, its dark eyes somehow finding the exact camera transmitting to Elias's location, thousands of miles away. Dr. Vance's ignorance was part of the design. A believing gardener plants a better crop than a reluctant one. You have 3 days remaining before harvest collection begins. We recommend calm compliance. Resistance has occurred before. It has never succeeded. The feed cut. The room erupted into chaos. Officials shouting over each other, phones ringing, someone already arguing for immediate military response, someone else arguing that any resistance would guarantee annihilation. Mara barely heard any of it. She was staring at her father, who had sunk into a chair, his hands shaking. Dad, she said quietly, kneeling beside him. This isn't your fault. I built the weapon that primed 6 billion people for slaughter, he whispered. I don't know how that isn't my fault. 2,000 miles away, inside the Nevada command tent, Colonel Reyes watched the same broadcast end and immediately turned to the data pulled from the buried structure at Site 9. Data her team had managed to copy before military command seized the chamber and locked it under a classification so high even she no longer had access. Ma'am, Okafor said, sliding a tablet toward her. You need to see this. I ran the star charts we photographed through every translation model we had, cross-referenced with the broadcast. Found something the aliens probably don't know we found. Reyes took the tablet. On the screen was a section of the star map from inside the chamber. Not the part showing Earth, but a smaller section near its edge. A list of coordinates and symbols that repeated in patterns across the wall. This is a harvest log, Okafor said. 412 worlds like the envoy said, except... He tapped the screen, highlighting 3 entries near the bottom, each marked with a symbol different from all the rest. A jagged, broken shape, instead of the clean triangle marking successful harvests. 3 worlds are marked differently. No harvest date recorded, no collection data. Just gone from the record after a certain point like something got redacted. Rhea stared at the 3 broken symbols. Failed harvests, she said slowly. That's my read too, ma'am. 3 worlds this Dominion tried to take and never finished taking, and whatever happened, they scrubbed it from their own history. Okafor looked up at her, something like fragile hope in his exhausted eyes. Ma'am, if it happened 3 times before, across 412 worlds, it can happen a 4th time. Reyes looked back at the tablet, at the broken symbols, then out through the tent flap at the alien ship hanging silent and enormous above the desert, its shadow stretching for miles across the dead earth of Site 9. Get this to Director Chen, she said. Encrypt it off every official channel. If even a piece of this leaks through the wrong hands, the Dominion will bury it same as they buried the truth on their own side. She paused, thinking of the 6 billion people now living under a 3-day countdown. And Okafor, find out everything you can about those 3 worlds. If someone beat this thing before, I want to know how. Okafor nodded and turned to go, but stopped at the tent entrance, looking back at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. Not fear, something sharper. Ma'am, one more thing. I cross-referenced the harvest log's date markers against Earth's own historical calendar. Best I could translate the Dominion's counting system. He hesitated. The most recent scouting entry on our world isn't from 6 years ago, when Dr. Vance found that sample in the desert. It's from over 11,000 years earlier. Ma'am, this isn't the first time the Dominion has come to Earth. And whatever happened last time, they marked us with a special notation none of the other 411 worlds carry. He turned the tablet around one final time, and Reyes felt something cold settle in her chest at the sight of a symbol beside Earth's very first entry in the Dominion's ancient log. Not the triangle of a successful harvest, not the broken mark of a failed one, but something else entirely. A single word, translated roughly, sitting alone beside humanity's name. Postponed. Postponed, Director Chen repeated, staring at the translated word on the screen as if it might change if she looked at it long enough. 11,000 years ago they marked us as postponed. Not failed. Not harvested. Postponed. Which means, Reyes said, her voice carried by secure video link all the way from Nevada into the underground London command room. Something happened back then that made them stop, and whatever it was, it scared them enough to skip us for 11,000 years and try 3 other worlds that also ended up failing. Elias sat forward, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. They're not gods. They're not unstoppable. They're farmers who got burned before and came back only when they thought the risk was gone. That's my read too, Reyes said. But we don't have 11,000 years to figure out what our ancestors did right. We have 60 hours. Mara had been quiet for a long while, scrolling through the leaked data Okafor had sent, cross-referencing it against something else entirely. The files R had first sent her, the ones about the dying soil at Prometheus grain test sites. A pattern was forming in her mind, one she didn't like. There's something else, she said, and the room turned toward her. R told me the soil was dying where the grain grows best. I thought it meant an environmental side effect. But look at this. She pulled up a chart from Rain's files, showing genetic markers found in soil samples near the test sites. Markers that matched nothing found in nature. These aren't decomposition markers. They're the same genetic signature found in Prometheus grain itself. The grain isn't just feeding us, it's changing the soil to match something. Rewriting it. Rewriting it into what? Elias asked, though something in his stomach already suspected the answer. Mara turned her laptop around. Into something closer to Dominion biology. I think the grain was never just food. I think everyone who's eaten it for the last 6 years has been absorbing something else along with the nutrition. A slow genetic priming, exactly like the envoy said. Genetic priming is complete across your species. That's not a metaphor. That's literal. The room went silent. How do we know? Chen asked carefully. That this priming isn't already irreversible. We don't, Mara admitted. But if it's real, it might also explain the 3 failed harvests. If genetic priming makes a species easier to process, maybe on those 3 worlds, something interrupted the priming before it finished. Made them harder to harvest than the Dominion expected. Elias stood up sharply, a new expression on his face, something between horror and desperate hope. The core sample, the one I found in the desert 6 years ago, the one I built Prometheus grain from. I still have the original untouched, before it was refined into a commercial crop. If I can reverse engineer what it's doing to human biology, maybe I can find a way to block it, or even use it against them. You want to turn their own weapon around, Reyes said, something sharpening in her voice, the tone of a soldier who had just found a plan worth fighting for. I like it. But doctor, you'll need lab access. We don't have time to build from scratch, and the Dominion is watching every major research facility on the planet. Then we don't use a major facility, Elias said. We use mine, the original lab in Nairobi, the one where this all started. It's small, mostly forgotten, off every watch list that matters because everyone assumes the real work happens in the corporate facilities now. Chen looked between them, weighing the risk, the impossible timeline, the fact that 6 billion lives now hinged on a plan built in a single frantic hour. Do it, she said. Colonel Reyes, I want you providing security. Ms. Vance, keep digging through his files. If he decoded 2 years of this material, there may be more we haven't found yet. And somebody find R. Whatever he knows, we need it before the 60 hours run out. The Nairobi lab was smaller than Mara had imagined, tucked behind a nondescript building on the edge of the city. The same field visible through its back windows where her father had first knelt in glowing soil years before. Reyes arrived with a small security detail hours later, and by the time night fell, Elias was hunched over old equipment that hadn't been used in years, running the original alien sample through every test he could think of. It's not just genetic material, he murmured, mostly to himself hours into the work. It's adaptive, reactive, like it's built to respond to stress. He looked up at Mara, dark circles under his eyes. Mara, I think the priming isn't finished by accident. I think it's designed to finish faster under fear, panic, compliance. The more afraid we are, the faster it completes. Which means resistance, Mara said slowly, might actually be the thing that stops it. Not violence for its own sake, Elias said, but defiance, refusal. Whatever made those 3 worlds fail, I think it wasn't a weapon. I think it was a mindset the Dominion's models never predicted. A sudden commotion outside the lab cut the moment short. Reyes burst through the door, weapon raised, her expression tight. We've got a problem, she said. Coastal collection has started early. A Dominion vessel just took the first live samples from an unprotected fishing village outside of Manila. No warning, no countdown respected. Civilians. 200, maybe more. Elias felt his blood run cold. They said 72 hours. They lied, Reyes said grimly. Or they simply don't consider it lying. Farmers don't warn the crop before the blade comes down. Mara's phone buzzed at that exact moment. A message from an unknown number, but this time she recognized the pattern immediately. It's R. I saw the news from Manila. Time's shorter than we thought. I finally cracked the last section of the Dominion's archive. The 3 failed worlds. I know what they had in common. It isn't a weapon. It isn't technology. It's something your father's grain almost erased from us before we even knew to fight for it. Meet me. The old satellite relay station outside Nairobi. 1 hour. Come alone this time. If they catch me with anyone official, they'll bury what I know forever, the way they buried it on their own side. Mara looked up, her hands trembling slightly. It's R. He wants to meet. Now. Alone. Absolutely not, Elias said instantly. Mara, after London. After London, nothing happened because Chen's people intercepted me before the actual danger could, Mara said. This time it's different. He's the only person on Earth who might know what those 3 worlds actually did. We don't have time to negotiate protocol. Rhea studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'll have a team shadow you at a distance, far enough that he won't spot us, close enough to move if things go wrong. Elias grabbed his daughter's arm before she could leave. Mara, please. I already lost my ignorance today. I can't lose you too. She squeezed his hand once, something fierce and steady in her eyes despite the fear underneath it. You're not losing me, Dad. You're watching me finish what you started, whether you meant to start it or not. She left the lab into the warm Nairobi night, the alien ship's shadow visible even now against the stars. And somewhere far above the Pacific, the first human beings in recorded history vanished screaming into the belly of a harvesting vessel, their absence about to ignite something the Dominion's 412 prior harvests had never once accounted for. Elias turned back to his equipment, hands shaking, and began transmitting something into the alien channel his own phone had first received days before. Not a message of surrender, but a signal built from the very sample the Dominion had planted in him, aimed straight back at their fleet. On the bridge of the primary Dominion vessel above London, vessel speaker Orentel's calm, unreadable expression shifted for the very first time since making contact. A flicker of something that, on a human face, might have been called alarm. The old satellite relay station stood dark against the night, its dish long rusted and unused, a relic from decades before Prometheus grain had ever been planted. Mara approached alone, her footsteps loud in the silence, while somewhere behind her, unseen, Reyes's shadow team held position at a careful distance. A figure stepped out from behind the base of the dish, thin, nervous, older than she had pictured from his messages. He looked like a man who had not slept safely in months. You came alone, he said, relief plain in his voice. You said it mattered, so I came alone. Mara studied him. You're R. Dr. Rajan Ose. I worked under your father for 4 years, mostly on soil chemistry, until I found things I wasn't supposed to find. He glanced nervously past her shoulder, into the dark. They're watching everything now. Every transmission, every call. I've been moving every few days since I first messaged you. Tell me about the 3 worlds, Mara said. You said it wasn't a weapon. Ose nodded, pulling a worn data drive from his jacket. I spent 2 years inside the Dominion's own archive, buried in fragments scattered across sites like the one in Nevada. Most of it is inaccessible, locked behind systems we can't touch. But near the end, I found survivor logs. Not human survivors, Dominion survivors, soldiers who were part of the failed harvest attempts, writing reports back to their command before those worlds were struck permanently from the record. He handed her the drive. The Dominion's models are built entirely around scarcity and abundance. Give a species abundance, watch them grow complacent, harvest them at the peak of their comfort, before they organize, before they truly unite. It's worked 409 times, but on those 3 worlds, something happened that broke the pattern completely. When the harvesting began, instead of individuals scattering to save themselves, something in those species caused the opposite. Strangers protected strangers. Resistance didn't come from armies. It came from ordinary people refusing to let each other be taken over and over. In numbers, the Dominion's collection ships weren't built to process. Cooperation, Mara said slowly. Under threat. Instead of falling apart, they came together. They came. More than that, Ose said. The Dominion's own reports called it anomalous bonding density. Species capable of extending loyalty to strangers, not just kin, under existential pressure. It overwhelmed their collection systems, which are built assuming panic causes chaos and self-interest, not unity. And your father's grain? He hesitated, glancing toward the sky. The genetic priming isn't just biological. It's meant to weaken exactly that trait before the harvest begins. Comfort, safety, and abundance for years engineered specifically to erode the instinct to sacrifice for strangers. Isolate people into private comfort so that when the ships finally come, there's no unity left to resist with. Mara felt something cold and furious settle in her chest. They didn't just prime our biology. They tried to prime our culture, 6 years of ease and plenty dividing us quietly before the real war even started. Yes, Osei said, but it isn't finished. It can't be finished in 6 years, not completely, not across a species as large and as stubborn as yours. That's why the failed world still failed even after generations of priming. There's something underneath it all the Dominion has never been able to fully erase. He looked at her, and for the first time something like hope crossed his exhausted face. Manila proved it tonight, Ms. Vance. Have you seen the footage? Mara shook her head, and Osei pulled up a video on his phone with shaking hands. Grainy, chaotic footage from the coastal village. Fishermen, ordinary villagers, forming human chains to pull neighbors from the grasp of a descending collection beam, throwing nets and tools at a ship far beyond their comprehension. Not out of strategy, but out of pure, desperate refusal to let their people be taken alone. They failed to collect over half their target number, Osei said. The Dominion has never seen resistance organized that fast, with that little warning, and it terrifies them more than any weapon could. A branch snapped in the darkness behind them. Mara spun, and Osei's eyes went wide with sudden panic. They found the signal, he whispered. They must have traced my last transmission. Bright light cut through the darkness, not Reyes's shadow team, but something else. A low humming shape descending fast from above, alien and silent. A smaller scout craft breaking from the larger fleet. Run, Osei said, shoving the data drive fully into Mara's hands. Get this to your father. Tell him the answer isn't in the grain. It's in what the grain was trying to take away from us. Come with me, Mara said, grabbing his arm. They're not here for you, he said, pulling free, something resigned and brave settling over his exhausted face. They're here for the leak, for me. Go, Mara, please. Let this matter. He turned and ran the opposite direction, drawing the scout craft's descending light away from her, and Mara forced herself to run toward the tree line as Reyes's team finally broke cover, weapons raised, shouting for extraction. She did not look back until she reached the vehicle. Breathless, the data drive clutched hard enough to hurt her palm. Behind her, the scout craft's light swept the relay station once, twice, and then simply stopped, hovering, before rising silently back into the night sky, Osei nowhere to be seen. Back at the Nairobi lab, Elias barely looked up when Mara burst through the door, breathless, until he saw her face and immediately crossed the room to her. Mara, what happened? Where's Osei? They took him, she said, her voice breaking for the first time since this had all begun. He led them away from me. Dad, he knew exactly what he was doing. She handed him the data drive with shaking hands, and together they loaded it into his equipment, the survivor logs from 3 ancient failed harvests spilling out onto the screen. Elias read in silence for a long moment, his expression shifting from grief to something sharper, something almost like understanding. It's not a weapon, he murmured, echoing Osei's words. It's a bond. Sacrifice for strangers. That's the variable they can't model, can't predict, can't fully erase no matter how many generations of easy comfort they engineer into a species. He looked up at his daughter, something breaking open in his exhausted face. Mara, that's exactly what you just watched Osei do for you. Before Mara could respond, Reyes burst into the lab, her expression grim, a tablet in her hand already streaming urgent reports from across the globe. It's happening everywhere now, she said. Manila wasn't isolated. Coastal collection attempts in 9 countries all met with resistance the Dominion clearly didn't plan for. People are organizing, Doctor, not with weapons, not with strategy, just raw refusal to let their neighbors be taken. It's spreading faster than any military campaign I've ever seen, and it's coming from civilians, not soldiers. Then we help them, Elias said, standing, something resolved settling over him for the first time since this nightmare began. I can use this sample to build something, not a cure for the priming and a countermeasure. Something that strengthens the exact trait they've been trying to erase, instead of letting it happen slowly on its own. How long? Reyes asked. With the equipment here? Days, not hours. He looked at the countdown still ticking on Chen's secure feed. the 72 hours long since broken by Manila's early collection, replaced now with something far more uncertain. We don't have days. Then we buy time, Reyes said. I've been coordinating quietly with remnants of a dozen militaries since the broadcast. Fractured, disorganized, most of our conventional weapons are useless against their shielding. But the ruins at Site 9 had more than star charts. There were weapon schematics too, buried in sections we only just finished translating. If we move fast, we might build something that actually hurts them. Elias nodded slowly, then froze, his eyes catching on something in Osei's data he had missed on the first read, a final section, appended almost as an afterthought. A genetic scan comparison chart with a name attached to it that made his blood turn to ice. Mara, he said quietly, his voice suddenly hollow. The genetic priming markers, the ones from the soil, the ones matching Dominion biology. Osei ran a private comparison against early clinical trial subjects exposed to the very first, unrefined version of Prometheus grain, before it went public, before any safety testing. Dad, what are you saying? He turned the screen toward her slowly, and Mara felt the floor tilt beneath her as she saw her own name listed among the earliest trial subjects. Her genetic markers highlighted in the same color as the Dominion's own biological signature, a percentage listed beside her name that was far higher than it should have ever been possible for an ordinary human being. You were 7 years old, Elias whispered, his hands shaking as the memory surfaced, buried under 6 years of denial. The first field trial. I brought you with me to Kenya that summer, and there was an accident at the original site, an exposure I convinced myself didn't matter because you seemed perfectly healthy afterward. Mara, I didn't just build the weapon that primed humanity. I primed my own daughter before I even understood what priming meant. Outside, sirens began wailing across Nairobi, distant collection beams visible now even from the lab's small windows, and Reyes's tablet lit up with an urgent alert, a Dominion transmission targeting a specific set of coordinates. Coordinates Reyes recognized immediately as the very building they were standing in. They know we're here, Reyes said, already moving toward the door, weapon raised. And Doctor, the transmission isn't asking for the lab. It's asking for her specifically. Mara Vance requested by name as what they're calling a priority collection sample. The building shook as something massive began to descend outside, and Elias grabbed his daughter's shoulders, desperation and love and terrible guilt all warring across his face at once. I am not losing you to the mistake I made, he said fiercely. Not after everything. The lab's lights flickered and died as the descending ship's shadow swallowed the last of the moonlight from the windows, and somewhere above them, a collection beam began to hum to life. The lab door blew inward before the beam ever reached them. Reyes had already thrown herself against the reinforced shutter release, and steel plates slammed down over the windows a half-second before the collection beam struck, the impact rattling the whole building like an earthquake. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere outside, soldiers from Reyes's shadow team opened fire on the descending ship with weapons scavenged from Site 9's translated schematics, and for one impossible moment the beam flickered and pulled back. That won't hold them long, Reyes shouted over the alarm. We move now, through the service tunnel. Elias didn't move. He was staring at his equipment, at the sample, at 6 years of guilt crystallizing into a single desperate idea. Dad! Mara grabbed his arm. We have to go. No, he said, and something in his voice made her stop. Mara, listen to me. This sample, the seed bank, the original genetic material Prometheus grain was built from. It's the master key to everything, every field on Earth, every strand of the priming still spreading through billions of people. It all traces back to this. If I destroy it now, I don't know if it stops the priming already inside people, but I know it stops the Dominion from ever refining it further, from ever building this weapon again on the next world they choose after us. Then destroy it, and let's go. It's not that simple. The failsafe requires a manual core breach, on-site, and someone has to trigger it from inside the containment field or it fails completely. He was already moving toward the reinforced case at the back of the lab, his hands steady now in a way they hadn't been in days. It takes 6 minutes to prime the breach. Someone has to hold this room for 6 minutes. Mara understood before he finished speaking, and the horror of it froze her in place. "No, Dad, no. Colonel Reyes will get you out through the tunnel," Elias said, already keying in the failsafe sequence, his voice breaking but his hands never stopping. "You have Osei's data. You have everything the world needs to fight back. Get it to Chen. Get it to every resistance cell forming right now across this planet. I am not leaving you here to die for a mistake that was never even your fault." "It was my fault," Elias said, turning to her at last, his eyes wet, but his voice steady. "I built the thing that primed you when you were 7 years old. I built the thing that's been quietly dividing this species for 6 years. I don't get to undo that, but I get to make sure it ends here, with me, instead of spreading into whatever they wanted to make out of you." He pulled her into a fierce, brief embrace. "You are the proof they were wrong, Mara. Not because of what's in your blood, because of who you chose to become despite it. Now go, please. Let me finish what I started." Reyes was already pulling her toward the tunnel entrance, soldiers falling back around them as the shutters began to buckle under a second collection beam strike. Mara fought against Reyes's grip for one more second, staring at her father standing alone amid failing lights and dying alarms. And then the tunnel door sealed behind them, and Elias Vance was gone from sight. The tunnel spilled them out 3 blocks away, into chaos. Nairobi's streets were filled with people, ordinary civilians who had seen the ships descending and, instead of hiding, had poured out into the open with whatever they could carry. Farming tools, vehicles turned into barricades, phones held high, broadcasting everything to a world watching in stunned, terrified unity. Reyes's radio crackled with reports flooding in from every continent now. Not organized armies, but something stranger and far more powerful. Millions of ordinary people refusing together, in numbers the Dominion's 411 prior harvests had never once encountered. Collection ships pulling back from cities where crowds had linked arms around vulnerable neighbors. Farmers turning tractors into makeshift barricades around entire towns. Strangers hiding strangers in basements and cellars, sharing food and shelter with people they had never met an hour before. Above them, the Nairobi lab shuddered once, twice, and then a pillar of white light erupted from its center, tearing upward through the roof and into the sky, the master seed bank and everything it contained burning away in an instant that Mara felt in her chest like a physical blow. She did not cry. Not yet. There wasn't time. "Chen's patched through," Reyes said, thrusting a radio into her hands amid the chaos. "She needs you. Now." Mara pressed the radio to her ear, Osei's data drive still clutched tight in her other hand. "This is Mara Vance. Ms. Vance?" Chen's voice came through, urgent and strained. "The Dominion is requesting direct contact with you specifically. Vessel speaker Oren Tell. They've paused collection operations worldwide, pending this conversation. Whatever you say next may matter more than anything said since first contact." The transmission connected her not through a screen, but through a strange, disorienting link that Reyes's team rigged, using fragments of Site-9's own alien technology. A direct channel straight to the bridge of the primary Dominion vessel, still hovering silent and enormous above London. Oren Tell's voice came through steady as ever, though something in its measured calm had shifted since the broadcast 3 days before. "Priority sample Mara Vance," it said. "Your genetic classification places you outside standard collection parameters. We wish to understand why your species' collection resistance has exceeded every historical model in our archive." Mara stood in the ruined street outside her father's destroyed lab, smoke still rising behind her. Osei's data drive warm in her hand, and something her father said settled into place inside her. "You are the proof they were wrong." "You want to understand us," she said. "Then understand this. 11,000 years ago, you marked this world postponed instead of harvested, because something here fought you to a standstill you were too ashamed to record properly. You came back because you assumed enough time had passed, enough comfort had been engineered, that whatever beat you before was gone. It isn't gone. It's still here. It's in every stranger who ran toward danger instead of away from it tonight. It's in a man who just burned his own life's work to keep you from ever using it again. It's in a researcher who led your scout ship away from me tonight so I could live long enough to have this conversation. Sentiment, Orentel replied, though something in its flat tone wavered, almost imperceptibly. Sentiment does not stop harvest fleets. Then explain Manila, Mara said. Explain 9 countries of failed collection in a single night. Explain 3 worlds erased from your own records because you couldn't bring yourselves to admit you lost. You didn't come back to Earth because you were confident. You came back because you were curious whether you'd finally get it right this time. You didn't. Silence stretched across the channel for a long moment. I am transmitting this conversation across every world in the Dominion's collection network, Mara continued, her voice steadier now. Years of chasing hidden truths, finally finding their purpose in this single impossible moment. Every species you've ever harvested is hearing this right now. Because OSE's data gave us the frequency your own scouts use to report collection status. They're hearing that Earth refused, that 3 other worlds refused before us and you erased them from your history rather than admit it. How many more of your 409 successful harvests were closer to failure than you ever told them? What happened next would be studied and argued over for generations. But the historical record, pieced together from 100 sources across a suddenly, chaotically unified world, agreed on the essential shape of it. Within hours of Mara's transmission reaching the wider Dominion network, reports of unrest began surfacing on distant, previously harvested worlds. Populations long believed pacified suddenly resisting collection quotas, citing Earth's defiance as proof that the Dominion's authority was neither absolute nor honest. Orentel's fleet withdrew from Earth's skies 6 days later, not defeated in open battle, but unwilling to risk further unrest rippling backward through an empire built on 412 worlds, now quietly questioning everything they had been told. Before the final ship broke orbit, one last transmission reached Chen's command center, addressed specifically to Mara Vance. Your species was never meant for standard harvest, Orentel's voice said, quieter now, stripped of its earlier flat confidence. 11,000 years ago, our first cultivation attempt on your world ended not in failure, but in something my ancestors called defeat. We do not have records of what happened, only that our scouts marked your world postponed and warned every generation after not to return until certain we could succeed. We returned believing 6 years of engineered abundance had erased what beat us before. We were wrong twice now. Perhaps your species was never meant to be cultivated at all, Mara Vance. Perhaps you were meant to be left alone. The channel closed for the final time, and the last Dominion ship rose silently out of Earth's atmosphere, shrinking to a point of light, and then vanishing entirely. 6 months later, Mara stood in a newly planted field outside Nairobi, the soil dark and healthy beneath a modified strain of grain her father's research team, what remained of it, rebuilt from Reyes's recovered data, and 100 volunteer scientists from a dozen nations now working together for the first time in human history, had spent months carefully purging of every trace of Dominion genetic material. A small memorial stood at the field's edge. Simple stone. Elias Vance's name carved beneath a single line Mara had chosen herself. He fed a world that did not yet know it needed saving from itself. Reyes found her there, as she often did these days, the two of them having become unlikely friends in the wreckage of everything that had happened. The council wants you in Geneva next week, she said. First formal ambassador appointment. Humanity's voice, for whatever's still watching us out there. I know, Mara said, watching the wind move gently through the new grain. Ordinary now. Harmless. Grown from soil that had finally stopped glowing. I keep thinking about what he said. Postponed, not harvested. 11,000 years ago, someone stood where I'm standing now and did something brave enough that a species capable of conquering 400 worlds decided to leave us alone for 11,000 years. Any idea what it was? Mara smiled, small and tired, and genuinely peaceful for the first time in months. No. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it wasn't one grand secret weapon. Maybe it was just people, choosing each other, over and over, the way Ose chose me, the way my father chose all of us, the way strangers all over this planet chose neighbors they'd never met the night everything nearly ended. She looked out at the field, gold and green under an open, undefended sky. Maybe that's the only thing that was ever going to work. She knelt down and pressed her palm against the soil, the way her father used to, feeling nothing but ordinary warmth rising up to meet her. Ordinary earth, ordinary grain, growing not because something distant and alien had planted it there for its own purpose, but because humanity finally had chosen to grow it for themselves. Above her, the sky stayed empty and blue, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, that emptiness felt less like an absence and more like a promise.